Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the online test conf, the place where we actually did online testing conferences before COVID. And I'm happy to welcome for our last presentation of the day, evening, afternoon, morning, whatever you are, to Peter Varhol. Peter, are you here?
Yes, I am, Joe.
Do you want to share your video, please?
I can do that. I think I can do that.
I trust
share
you.
screen.
I trust you.
Share screen.
Wait,
there we
share
go.
screen. I'm going to stop my share, and then you can share your screen.
I seem to have trouble sharing. That's what my parents. That's what my parents always said about me.
I'm going to tell Jerry about it.
I don't. Yeah. So how do I share it? I saw it shared right up until the time that you said I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but now I don't
have a problem. Let me share. You should have a red button next where you have all the mute, unmute, video.
I don't see any of that, unfortunately. I'm not bringing up.
Did you go?
Oh, sorry. You know. Okay, so I don't know. Maybe
It might have been hidden by another window. Usually, Zoom stuff.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, you're. Let me. There we go. Okay, so let me share screen. Yep. And I will. Okay.
Oh, now we even see your screen.
Great. Yeah, I was oddly I was minimized. So
yeah, don't worry. If you want, you can also share your video for a second, so that people can see who they're talking to. It's not mandatory.
Oh, I'm happy to do so. Well, let's see. Start video. Start video. Okay. You cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Oh, you saw? That's me. Wait. There we go.
Start my video.
Okay, now we're there. Okay.
Yeah. So okay.
Now we're here. We're finally here. Now, just a short intro. Formally, on what it's written, Peter is a software strategist and evangelist. Informally, because we've met in the past, I think even a couple of times before.
We met. So we met, Joel. The last time we met, we were in Der Haag, Netherlands.
Oh, we were in Der Haag.
And I had just arrived on an overnight flight that morning, and I'm wandering through the exhibition hall, and you're shouting out, "Peter, Peter, Peter!" And I heard nothing.
That sounds like me. But I actually heard you speaking in Spain, in Bilbao and QA test. And
oh, yes, of course.
I really like the way that you're able to approach and explain issues, and how you're able to humanize a lot of those issues. And that is why I thought that.
Boy, that's how I compliment Joel. Thank you.
Oh, well, you have it coming. Not my fault. Sorry about that. You've earned it. In any case, I'm more than looking forward to try to understand how we need to interact, communicate in today's this unfortunately pandemic-defined reality that we live in. So, Pete, floor is yours.
Okay, let me actually take my presentation and do that so that we're actually seeing the presentation. And what I'm going to talk about here is a presentation that I've given in a couple of different formats calling Talking to People. It was gratifying earlier today to hear Pete Whalen talking about how we need to communicate better. And so I'm going to throw this back on to Pete Whalen and say, I really appreciated how he set me up for this particular talk. So with that in mind, a little bit about me. You really don't care about any of this, but I have some credentials, and but what Joel said about me just a minute or so ago, I thought was trumps any credentials that I may in fact have had. The only thing that I'd like to point out here is if you want to get in touch with me, peter@petervarhol.com, you're welcome to email me. You're welcome to communicate in any way that you like, because I'm a strong believer in communications. So I have a couple of slides here before I even get to my agenda. This one I got, this quote I got, it was from a book called by the author and MIT researcher Sherry Turkle, called Reclaiming Conversation. And her thesis is that we have forgotten how to communicate just in general. This was before COVID-19, but I think it's still relevant. Conversation, it died in 2009. But it's been dying for a much longer period of time than that. This is from a 2007, 2006, actually, December 26, 2006 issue of the British magazine Punch. And it shows two people in a park, both of which are communicating to somebody digitally, but they're not, even though they're sitting right next to each other, they're not communicating with each other. So I talked a little bit about silos. Why is remote communication, why is communication in general so difficult? Why is remote communication doubly, even triply difficult? I talk about what we need to do in order to communicate effectively, which is basically giving up control of a situation. How do we communicate while distributed? And then I've got some summary and conclusions to talk about. Part of the problem is that we've been geared towards being in silos as a part of members of companies. So it's really all about these things. We communicate, I'll say, fairly well within our own little groups, but we don't talk enough between groups. So what do we do instead? And I found this particular bit of information. Our economy's biggest problem may actually be the smartphone, which you would think that, okay, we've got a phone, we've got something that enables us to communicate in a wide variety of different ways that we didn't used to be able to communicate in. But it's caused a problem with our economy. We're just not producing as much as we once did. Some will blame social media. I certainly feel that. I'm not a big social media fan, but I do participate. We don't necessarily we're not necessarily able to communicate effectively with each other because we're too busy tweeting, we're too busy doing Facebook updates, messaging with our friends, and it's not really doing a whole lot to help us boost the economy. So let me ask you this, and I'm not expecting a response, but think about this. Have you ever checked email in a meeting? I certainly have. Have you ever updated Facebook for a quick break? I'm not a member of Facebook, so don't even bother looking for me there. But no, I've never updated Facebook, but I know a lot of people who do. Do you pull out your phone because you're bored, whether it be in a meeting, a social situation, something like that? I certainly do that because it looks like you're doing something. It looks like you're busy. But more telling, have you ever just stopped, I'll say communicated, stopped texting, stopped messaging, stopped communicating with somebody because you didn't like where the conversation was going? You suddenly maybe felt uncomfortable. what was being said, maybe pointing to you and saying, this is something that you're just not comfortable, a particular topic or a particular conclusion concerning you or other people, that you're just not comfortable with continuing that conversation. So guess what? Face-to-face, it's hard to stop at that point in time, but when we're not face-to-face, it makes it easy to just say, I'm just not going to continue this. And we communicate differently at a distance. We're either outspoken or we're not speaking up. And part of the problem is that we're getting less or even no nonverbal feedback from others. We don't know what the audience is thinking. We're oftentimes, and I'm guilty of that right here and now, speaking to an audience we don't know. So other than Joel, I'm not sure about, I probably know a few of the rest of you, but I don't necessarily know who you are in terms of face-to-face and expecting any sort of feedback or anything like that. And worse, sometimes we don't even treat people that we can't see as human beings. And social media is a part of this problem. It makes it easy to duck hard conversations. If I don't want to continue a conversation, I can ignore somebody's tweet. I can ignore their text. I can wait to respond. However, in the COVID-19 era, in the shelter-in-place era, it also has to be part of the solution. We have to make use of all of the resources we have. And the more variety we use in talking to one another and communicating with one another, the better we get our meaning across. So let's take a look at this. This is a little bit on the old side, but so we've got the one guy, our former United States president, who's actually paying attention. Everybody else looks bored out of their mind. So how do we deal with these face-to-face meetings? And I'm certainly talking to you right now. I have no idea whether or not all of you or any of you are paying attention. You might be checking emails. You might be daydreaming. So there's a lot going on here. And how do we actually get people's attention? How do we effectively communicate when I'm not looking you in the eye and saying, here we are, we're sharing a problem, we're trying to come up with a solution, whatever it might be. So we actually talk more than ever. We email, we text, we instant message, we Skype, we do conference calls, we tweet, we do Facebook updates, we do video. God knows how much more video we've done over the last year than we've ever done in our lives before. So we're talking more than ever. And yes, we're even using, dare I say it, emojis. But we say less than ever. We might say, let's touch base next time you're in town. How's the weather there? We say things oftentimes that we don't really mean, just because we feel the need to say something, whether it be through text or video, whatever it might be. And I'll say worse, perhaps worst of all, is that we script our conversations. Because we're not doing something spontaneous, we are thinking 2 or 3 sentences ahead, and how just how we're going to say something in particular. So why do we do this? why do we, when we're not talking face-to-face, why do we communicate so poorly? I like to think that it's all about control. I did a version of this presentation a few years ago, and I had it was a decent audience. It was a couple hundred people, and I said, how many of you are working on more than one thing at a time? Well, just about every hand in the room went up. How many of you are doing 3 or 4 tasks, activities, projects at a time? And most of the hands still stayed up. I actually had one person who started waving his arms in the back of the room. And when I called upon him, he held up 10 fingers. He says, I'm juggling 10 things right now. So guess what? We really, if we're juggling more tasks whenever, we really feel like we're not in control of the situation. We feel that the situation is controlling us. Well, when we start talking to people, that's yet another thing that we have no control over. It's unpredictable. So what we try to do when we're not face-to-face is we try to make communications predictable, because we don't want the stress of having to figure out what I'm going to say 3 or 4 or 5 seconds from now. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring predictability back into our lives which are increasingly less predictable. We're trying to bring predictability back into our lives. And guess what? Not being face-to-face helps us maintain the illusion of control. We can choose when we start a conversation, what we start a conversation with. We can edit what we say. How many of you have ever typed an email or part of an email, typed a text, part of a text, and said, this isn't quite the way I want to say this? And so we erase it and we start over again. We don't say what we're really thinking. And not only that, but we can choose when that conversation is over. So I'm not going to stop Zoom and play this video clip, but many of you may well recognize this particular gentleman. This is Boris from the James Bond movie GoldenEye. And things are exploding all around him. The whole facility is, and unfortunately, it's the Arecibo radio telescope, which has pretty much blown up. But so he's in a satellite facility where everything around him is just going to heck in a handbasket, and he survives for the moment, and in exuberance, holds up his arms and says, I am invincible. And you know, it's a really nice scene, and that's the way that we would like to feel when we're having a conversation, when we're communicating with somebody. We would like to feel that we're in fact invincible. So guess what? No, we're not, in fact, invincible. We're very vulnerable as we're holding a conversation, whether it be a verbal conversation, a text conversation, whatever it might be. No, we're not, in fact, invincible. But we still have that need to be in control. We're afraid, in fact, to be spontaneous. Why are we afraid to be spontaneous when we're not face-to-face with somebody? Even when we are face-to-face with somebody, why are we afraid to actually communicate spontaneously? And I think it's because we want to be the person that we would like to be. You see the little cat looking in the mirror and sees a lion. That's how we would like to appear other people. We don't want to show our true selves. We don't want to show that vulnerability. Distributed teams tend to amplify that because we're not getting face-to-face feedback. We're not getting, we're not being able to, I'll say, communicate effectively and spontaneously in discussing our problems, in discussing solutions, in asking questions and things like that. So what are our excuses? I don't have the time. I don't have the time to bother thinking how I want to appear to other people. So I just don't. I'm not good face-to-face, or I'm not good on video, or whatever it might be. Now, I have a little problem there because I'm not I've never been a very social person. Yet I feel the need to be able to communicate effectively with other people. I mean, it's pretty much what I do for a living, and it's a large part of what we all do. So whether we're good at face-to-face, or whether we're good on video, or whether we're communicating, we can't say, I'm not good. If we are not good, then we can use the practice. I stress at encounters. How many of you stress at communicating with other people? Oftentimes we say, I need white space. I need some space around me. I'm more productive online. I knew of a group of about 3 or 4 engineers at a particular company. They had cubicles all lined up in a row. And they worked within these cubicles, but they were like just a few feet apart. And what would happen was that they would IM one another. They never got up and walked over to the next person's cubicle and says, hey, I have a question. Some people say, I need a record of a conversation. We've never needed a record of a conversation before. Why do we now? Or we put it off. I'll call and or text them later. So why do we bother talking at all? We have this thing called the 7% rule that says that 7% of information that we exchange with other people is verbal. What does that mean? It means that when I'm speaking to you now, or whether we're speaking face-to-face, or whether on a video or something like that, relatively little of our information is conveyed with our actual words. The nonverbal component, body language and tone of voice, convey far more information than our actual words. You may find that to be surprising, but it's actually true. We communicate more effectively non-verbally, much more effectively, with a lot more information non-verbally than we do verbally. So when we're using our devices, whether it be the phone, whether it be video conferencing, whether it be Twitter, what are we losing? We're losing, I will say, first of all, spontaneity. We don't say the first thing that comes into our mind. Now, you might think that's a good thing, but guess what? The first thing that comes into our mind is most often the most relevant and the most interesting thing that we can possibly communicate. We lose the flow of random ideas. We may find problems that we didn't know exist and come up with solutions that we didn't know were possible. But I think most important is that what we lose is practice. We lose practice actually communicating, whether it be face-to-face. Now, we're talking about how we do this, not necessarily face-to-face in a shelter-in-place world, but we're losing practice in actually communicating with one another because we're trying to plan the whole thing out. So how do we get that back? Especially now that we're no longer physically together. It's not unusual. And in fact, I work with people. I work with people for a lot of this year. People that I've never met before. I've only heard their voices. I see them occasionally on video conferences. But I work with a lot of people that I've never actually physically met. How do we make that tolerable? So I'm going to say, first of all, let's get to know each other as individuals, not just a picture on a screen or text on a screen or anything like that. Let's say something about ourselves. Hey, did you know that I have 2 cats? And they're Stephanie and Monica, and they're wonderful cats, and I would just love sitting here all day talking about my cats. Happy hours. How do we do virtual happy hours? Your company may already do them. My company has this thing called Third Thursdays, where every third Thursday of the month, we pose a question online that several teams get together to try to work their way through, and they're usually fun questions. We said, you know, what's your favorite commercial? And so we talked about what our favorite commercials were, and it was absolutely fascinating. We can use customized video backgrounds. I don't happen to be using a customized video background right now, but we can let our personality come through with what we choose to show people. We do brainstorming sessions. Let's get together and once again, pose a problem and start exchanging ideas on how to solve that problem. So what's the role of communications here? The communications is, first of all, to streamline our processes. How do we let people know what we're doing? How do we say, I've got a good idea here, or I'm stuck. Can somebody help me? Or I'd like to share this idea, share this insight. It's how we get work done too. We get work done by communicating with one another. It's by far the most important way that we do things and solve problems, of course. And sometimes we even find problems that need to be solved, but unless we actually start talking about them, unless we actually start communicating about those problems, we'll never find them. Most of us, I'm going to say, have home offices right now. So how do we design these home offices to streamline our communication with other people? We don't have, in many cases, we don't have lunchrooms anymore. But the more we can put people in non-meeting scenarios, where maybe they're communicating, once again, maybe they're talking about random problems, or they're just talking about, you know, there was one Third Thursday that my company had recently, where we would talk about what are we doing for the summer now that our travel opportunities are very limited. What are our summer plans? What are our holiday plans? I can't emphasize, this is more difficult to do these days, I can't emphasize the value of meeting one another in non-work settings, whether it be off-sites, and I know companies are less likely to do offsite meetings now because we're just not meeting up all that much. But it's important to be able to put a face to a text or a face to a video. How do we design our workspaces such that our personality comes through and that other people can get a glimpse of our personality? Because the more we know what each other as people, the more important it is to be able to use that information to be able to communicate more effectively with one another. Leadership. You may or may not be in a leadership position, but if you are, you need to lead by example. I've been in meetings before where, and once again, this face-to-face meeting, they can be video meetings too, where the person who's running the meeting says, I want everybody to put away their phones. Well, 30 seconds later, their phone rings. Oh, I need to take this. That's a mixed message. So let's make sure that we don't have such mixed messages. Oftentimes meetings, and I'm fortunate that I don't have to do this right now, but I've been in organizations that literally will take hours of the day at a meeting, and it never seems like the meeting does in fact have a clear goal. Publish an agenda if you're going to take more than a half an hour of your team's time. Let's have a clear goal. Let's publish an agenda. Let's talk about what we're trying to accomplish or what we hope to take away from this meeting. Geographically dispersed teams is where probably most of us are in this position right now. Dispersed and remote teams have become the norm these days, but they offer some significant barriers to actually being able to communicate. And we need to be creative. We want to show our personalities. We want to get together occasionally in non-work settings. If we can do so face-to-face, that would be great. If we can't, let's talk about what we can do online with videos, whatever it might be, to be able to communicate effectively with one another without necessarily talking about work. Use multiple communications channels. If you're just using Zoom or if you're just using Slack, you're missing out on the ability to communicate using all of the tools at your disposal. And if you're doing that, chances are somebody may, or part of your team may not be very, I'll say, effective at communicating on video, but if you ask them to write down a problem, or if you ask them to describe a problem, you might find that they're much more effective using another communication channel. So by all means, let's talk about how we can use as many communications channels as possible in communicating amongst our team. Chat ops, there we go, with, for example, Slack. We can combine both communications and action. We can talk to people, but we can also kick off scripts. We can we can find a number of different ways to do different things using chat ops technology. Talk to team members, exchange data, execute scripts. So why do we talk? Well, we solve problems more quickly once we communicate with one another. We might be addressing issues we never knew we had. We establish trust with people. How do we, without being face-to-face, how can we get to trust the people that we're working with? Because trust helps us become more productive. It helps us with regards to solutions that people have. These solutions become more believable. They become more trustworthy. How do we make that happen? Especially not in a face-to-face world. And I can't emphasize this one enough. And that is, we get practice. As I said, I don't consider myself a great communicator. I certainly didn't grow up as a great communicator. Yet I like to think that I enjoy talking to people, that I am effective at conveying information and receiving information. That's through years of practice. So how about video calls? Inexpensive solutions such as Zoom have enabled video to proliferate. I've already been on 3 or 4 video calls today. I remember back in the day where you would have video conferencing, dedicated rooms, cameras, servers, a video conferencing solution, even just 20 years ago, could easily run a company $50,000 or more. So we also need to be cognizant of what settings we're using. I know my camera's on right now. I can see myself. I can see myself on video. You can probably see me too. I have the choice of shutting off my camera if I so desired. I have the ability, if I have the camera on, I have the ability to, for example, have backgrounds and, or to, once again, maybe be holding a cat or something like that and saying, here, this is a part of me, this is a part of my personality. Can we mute during our meetings? Should we be muting? Or can we comment at any time? How can we personalize our experience with regards to using video with other people? What part of our personalities do we want to show and why we want to show it? Let's think about just how we want to personalize ourselves during the meetings that we have. Now, I came across this one just a few weeks ago, and I thought it was very interesting. So some of you may use Microsoft Teams as a part of your as a part of your distributed communication solution. One of the things that Microsoft Teams is enabling people to do now is to build in downtime at the beginning and the end of the day. They call it a virtual commute. Lets users schedule literally online commute time. At the beginning of the day, rather at the end of the day, you can use it to wind down, or maybe in the middle of the day, you can use it to just take a walk. In the morning, you can use your online commute time to schedule your day, and then in the evening, reflect on what you accomplished during the day. Now, I found that this was actually quite fascinating because it enables us to adapt our mindsets. It enables us to change our mindset without having to go through traffic. I know that I've commuted physically at various times in my life, and traffic here in the Boston area is during rush hours absolutely horrendous. So a lot of people say, well, I use my commute time to get out of work mode, or to get into work mode, or to think about what I'm going to do, and think about maybe an upcoming phone call or an upcoming meeting. Well, this enables us to adapt our mindset without the traffic hassle, which I find quite fascinating, actually. So I'd like to finish up here by taking a quote from the Agile Manifesto. And I think that this is very relevant to how we communicate with one another during the day. And I think that it would help us, it would behoove us to be able to internalize these particular words. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So we've got plenty of tools out there we can use. We've discussed some of them here. But we're really trying to figure out how to better connect with one another. Tools can help that, but we don't necessarily need the tools as long as we have respect for each other as individuals and respect for other people's opinions and respect for what others are able to do and how they're able to help us during our individual tasks. I've got some references here. You should, if you need the slides, I'm happy to send them to you. But as I pointed out, Sherry Turkle, who's a researcher at MIT, wrote a book, a fascinating book, and I strongly recommend reading it, Reclaiming Conversation, the Power of Talk in the Digital Age. Google actually builds in waiting times in its cafe. So people, it's cafes so that people can take the time to actually talk to one another about anything whatsoever. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn this back to Joel. And Joel, you can wake up now. And if we have any questions, that would be great.
As hard as it may sound, given that it's 10:41 p.m. over here in Israel, and there's an open bottle of whiskey behind me, I'm sober and awake, and I have.
I'm sorry to hear that. The sober part.
Now, I do have good news, and that is that Israel's week is Sunday to Thursday. So for me, it's basically Friday night. So don't worry. I'll take care of that soon enough.
Take care of the whiskey soon enough. Gotcha. Yes.
As well. I have been listening, and there are a lot of things that resounded with me pretty much in the sense of needing sometimes to artificially take that time. I didn't know that Microsoft had actually placed it in, or Google, but I am a very strong believer in the need to disconnect, and I think that it's not even COVID that did it. I think that high tech in general, the globalization, the fact that we work 24/7, and it's driving the world nuts. But I have found some interesting things in COVID, and I wanted to basically get your point in this. And there are two things that I cannot say that they're good on COVID, but at least that COVID has improved. One of them being the fact that we understand that we don't need to come to the office in order to have effective work.
Isn't that fascinating?
Collaboration. That's the interesting part.
A year ago, if you had told, I'll say, a majority of tech workers, can you work by yourself? A lot of them would have said, no, I need to be in an office. I need to be around people.
And not only that, but we were not even aware of the real hurdles from not coming to the office. Meaning, everyone thought that it would be the fact that you would still be in your pajamas and shorts, and that would motivate you. And people, at least in my case, I didn't realize that the biggest hurdle would be laundry. Remembering that you need to do lunch for the kids. Meaning, those becomes the things that you need to tame more than that irresistible urge to stay in bed. I don't have that, nor do I have an urge to open Netflix in the middle of the day. But And those were like the things that we thought of. Not only that, but we thought that it would be harder for us to work and even harder to communicate. And I will be the first person to say that it took a while. It took, I don't know if it was a matter of 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or 2 months to get into that tempo. But today I feel very well about it. So much so, I still enjoy coming to the office once or twice a week. But my time in my home office at home, even though most of my kids, I have 3 kids, so 2 of them are basically starting from home. Yeah, each of us learned to set our tempo. So that was something actually very interesting. But the thing that I enjoyed the most, and this is something that I tell my customers quite a lot of my work is about working with practice customers, a lot.
Yes.
And well, I used to travel at least once a week just to be in their places. And meetings were very formal, so much so that you got dressed up and stuff and shoes or whatever, and they were the same. And all of a sudden, we understood that it's perfectly okay to get on a call. And at the beginning, we didn't share cameras. Now everyone is doing it. And you realize that, well, we're all in T-shirts because we're in the middle of air conditioning and we're at home. Why do we need to dress up? And some of us will have a painting. And most people that I talk to don't even have like virtual backgrounds. They show you their own background. And more times than not, there's going to be an interruption that no one cares about anymore.
Yes.
And it, you know what it made? It made me realize that
a dog barking, a kid saying, "Hey, daddy," yeah, whatever.
Well, my kids walking behind me because they need to print something out, and the printer is in my desk. But it made us human. We're not wearing masks anymore, and it's okay because we can be professional and human at the same time. And I find that fascinating, and I find that refreshing, and I find that even invigorating in a sense. And I'm afraid that we will lose it once we go back into the old, new, whatever normal it's going to be. But for me, it's interesting that, you know what, I feel very comfortable putting in my Slack, we Slack internally, do not disturb. I need 2 hours to work on something, and people will, unless there's something urgent, respect it. So in a sense, I'm getting more work done from home because in the office, I don't like closing my door, so people would just hop in and say, "Hey, do you have a second?" And I feel very bad saying no. Whereas in Slack, I can just put it, people will respect it. So I think that it's even nice, and I feel comfortable enough doing most of my meetings in Slack. But by the way, it did take time, and it did take us making that change where we said, no. By default, cameras are on because it's a meeting in order to talk face to face. If I wanted, there is an importance for that. But I think it's interesting. I think that at least it's very, very interesting to me.
And I'm not going to disagree with you. And I think that you've raised some very good points. I've worked at home a lot over the years, probably more over the last 10 or 15 years, probably worked at home more than I've worked in an office. And I've came into this feeling comfortable at it, but I'm just amazed at how many people say exactly what you're saying.
And you know, I think that we need to find the good in the situations we are, and this is something that I hope we will be able to do it. Well, so much so that we have been talking in the office, and well, once we go back to normal, it will still be legitimate for people to say, I want to do 2 days at home and 3 days in the office, or some kind of mix of that. And we might even encourage it for most. So in any case, I wanted to thank you because you did bring up a number of interesting points and perspectives, and even reminders in a sense that even juggling 10 things at one time, it's not a matter of being a hero, it's a matter of being in trouble. And also all sorts of other interesting anecdotes in there. So I want to thank you very much for the talk, Peter.
And Joel, thank you for inviting me. I always enjoy speaking to people, and just the sessions that you put on, and just talking to you in general was a lot of fun.